How's it going, everybody? Glad to see you guys today. We are glad to do this. This is a kind of a random live that we're doing here, but I talked to a couple of my friends that are willing to do it, so we have a couple of surprise guests, and what we're talking about today is just kind of some post-election coverage and thoughts. Monumental moment happened in our country yesterday, and a lot of people are trying to make sense of it, and I think now is the time for Christians to speak about worldview and about how to show God's love in the middle of all this. So today I have an atheist and a well-known Christian scholar to discuss for the next few minutes about what's going on in our country. So without any further ado, we have on my right, depending on what side of the screen you're looking at, on my right, Professor Doug Grotas, who is a professor of apologetics at Cornerstone Christian University, up in one of our swing states, as far as I can remember. And then we have also my good friend, formerly known as the Theist Atheist, and was also one of our lives in one of our swing states. And actually, we didn't even plan it that way; it just kind of happened like that. And already, I wish we could bring her on the podcast right now. We have Lindsay Medenwalt saying, "Hey, friends." That's right. It's like, I wish you could be here with us. So
I read her book.
Yeah, great book. I read that this summer as well. It's kind of crazy when atheists and Christians are reading the same book. I don't know if that's something that should be said about me or you, Richard. I don't know. No. So that said, let me give you some introductions. And why did I choose these two guys? Well, honestly, you zoom out here just a little bit, make sense of the frame. Honestly, Richard, who is an atheist, say hi, Richard, for those who don't know you.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you.
We were having a discussion a couple of weeks ago at an apologetics conference about how he could just never support Donald Trump as a candidate, which is, a lot of people felt that way. And then we have on the other side, Professor Grotas, who's a Christian thinker, scholar, been in the biz for quite a while. And he and I would disagree with that. So what we're not going to do today is debate. We're going to discuss some things. And we've kind of agreed not to just hang on the whole, like, should Trump have won or not, but it's like, what happened here? And like, what's the way forward now that we're in this? So yeah, I gave a brief introduction. If you guys want to fill in any blanks, we can go ahead and do that. Or if you want to hop into the conversation, however you'd like to do it. So
I'm happy for now.
Okay. All right. So what in the world happened? That's not, I mean, I'm watching this go down, and it's like swing state after swing state after swing state starts falling. And, you guys have thought about this stuff a lot more than I have. I forgot to say that Richard also works for Homeland Security and things, and, he's in this world. So it's like, but he predicted this a couple weeks ago. He's like, I don't really want Trump in there necessarily, but he's probably going to win. So what do you think? What do you think happened there, Richard?
Well, just going back to 2020, there were a lot of conservatives and independents who were just tired of Trump. Whether they should have been that way or not, they were just tired of him. And here in Arizona, there's a lot of anti-establishment voters here in Arizona. And sometimes the right cuddles up to them and sees them as allies, but not always, because they see Trumpism as an establishment too. So they were just done with that. And I think that held in 2022 as well. Any candidate that was running purely on a Trump-centric campaign lost. So I think they were sick of him in 2022 as well. But come 2024, that's a lot of time. That was plenty of time. Trump transitioned from cheating, help, here comes this miracle. He went from that to announcing a new campaign and dropped the cheating. He still talks about it, but it was now going forward. He was now focused on 2024. He dropped the cheating. The left kept screwing up. So even though I'm anti-Trump, that doesn't make me pro-left. I can bash the left probably better than both of you guys can. I'm just, my background is I'm just very conservative. I was raised as a Thomas Sowell conservative. Um, they got along great with evangelicals back then. Whether that's the case now is another thing. But I'm just a very conservative guy, and I don't like snowflakes. Never been big on snowflakes. So,
Hmm.
uh, what I see is that uh, for the last 2 years, Trumpism hasn't been uh, uh, talking about cheating and whining, and has been talking about going forward. And the left has been screwing up. So a lot of people were saying, "Okay, I'm done with that establishment, and I'm going to go back to this establishment, which now looks different than it did back in those days." So I just think that that's why they won.
Hmm. So what do you think, Dr. Grotas? What happened? What happened in all this?
Yeah, I'm not really an expert on the whole political landscape, but I think I was surprised. I'm a pessimist by nature, so I was predicting that Kamala was going to win because the electorate is so completely bamboozled and ignorant and ridiculous. In fact, I said this is going to be the first Neil Postman election
Hmm.
where image will completely triumph over any sort of substance whatsoever.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, Kamala's got a nice smile and people want something different and she's attractive and all the celebrities are for her and people don't go deep into the issues at all. And of course, there's a large contingent of people that really just viscerally hate Donald Trump and they'll vote for anybody. I mean, they'd vote for Satan over Trump, calling him Hitler and all the rest. So I was really surprised. So
Hmm.
I didn't predict this at all. But as I look at it, I have some hope. I'm not a big Donald Trump supporter. You'll never see me with a MAGA hat or even a Trump sign on my lawn. I have a pro Israel sign I put on my lawn earlier this year
Hmm.
with my previous house. And I've got my Israel and US buttons
Oh,
here on my lapel.
I was wondering what the
But
top flag was.
yeah, that's Israel, and then that's US. So I call myself a old line conservative or classical liberal, and I wanted to the 2016. I really wanted Cruz to get the nomination. I even supported his campaign, Ted Cruz. I very reluctantly supported Trump when Hillary Clinton said literally these words: "The unborn person does not have a constitutional right to life." And I thought, well, that's it. If she's going to call the unborn a person and still say there's no right to life,
Hmm.
then it's another case of the lesser of two evils, which I also call the evil of two lessers. I didn't make that up, but I think that's a good way to put it. And I don't view my vote. I wrote an essay on this on the metaphysics of a vote. I don't view a
Hmm.
vote as a congratulation or a total endorsement or of a person. I view it as I'd rather have this person than the other person, and this person is likely to win. So I'm not the kind of person who will write in a candidate or write in my dog or something. I'm tempted to put Sonny in there, but I'm not the kind of
I
person who does that. So
I would vote for Sonny. I would.
I
I've
know
seen it.
I announce his campaign every year, but we've yet to receive any money or dog biscuits or anything. Um, so I'm relieved. I'm happy. I think the country will be far better off with Donald Trump than Kamala Harris. But I guess if I have any political analysis, it would be that uh, the polls undercounted Trump voters. I think maybe a lot of Trump voters are still a bit reluctant to tell people. I don't know. I think also the pollsters tended to be maybe more to the left, so they wanted to have a more optimistic view of Kamala's prospects for all this. But I'm not euphoric at all. I mean, I'm a Christian, so I don't place my ultimate hope in any one politician or any one political party. It's
Hmm.
simply a matter of siding with the person and the principles I think most line up with a biblical worldview. And secondly, most line up with the historic American vision of civil government. And I think probably Richard and I agree on that as conservatives, even if I'm a Christian and he's not a Christian, he's an atheist.
Hmm. Yeah, I think from my perspective, my only expertise in the political world has been just as an observer and a product of the 9/11 generation, and working in politics. But I worked for the left back in 2008 during the Obama administration, and I could see a lot of parallels with that. And and just being in apologetics and cultural apologetics, it doesn't make you an expert, but it certainly makes you pause and think about some of these hot button issues quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you said there, Doug, about a lot of people that were like, the polls have always been off on this. Like, it's always been like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, the polls were drastically off. I was actually watching MSNBC coverage, and they were talking about that. Like, we've got to do something different with polling because we don't know what we're doing. And I don't know if it's just wishful thinking or what with these pollsters, but it's not unique to Trump, because the same thing happened during the 2008 Obama campaign too. When we were working for Obama, the polls didn't seem, the best I can remember, what the reflection was, many people claimed they were not voting for him that did vote for him. So the entrance and exit polls were two totally different things. And there's even a word for that. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, like the something effect, So yeah, it's like this reluctancy, and I wonder if that's not a product of all the polarization that's surrounded American politics now. That predates Trump, believe it or not. A lot of people try to blame him.
Absolutely.
It definitely predates him. So yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to point that Trump is a product of this madness. He didn't start it. He's just one of the most popular products of it.
What would you describe as the madness there, Richard?
Well, so human nature, this is, because I didn't mention this in the intro, but I work in counterterrorism, and I have for 30 years, 10 years as a Marine. And my biggest academic pursuit is why people go crazy. Why do they get so radicalized and they just want to dehumanize other people? And it turns out that's just human nature, and it doesn't require religion. I know a lot of atheists like to blame religion for it, but it's not. It's human nature to fall in love with an idea, and that's, so far, actually, that part is good. But then you start to hate people and dehumanize people who don't love that idea, and that's very popular. So if you want to start a podcast, it's better to do that for your podcast, to present your idea as the number one thing, start hating on the other ones, and you're probably going to grow very quickly because it's very popular. And that's just human nature. And I think social media exacerbated that, and a lot of us fell for it. And so that's where we are now, where what Trump did was he just had a lot of money to step up on that stage and say, I'm with these guys. These guys over here on this side, I'm with them. He's not. He hasn't even taken the time in 10 years to learn your ways. But he did claim that stage, and a surprising number of people have accepted it. But now, 10 years later, a bunch of other people are up on that stage too. So it's become this other thing. 10 years later, it's another thing. But my biggest point is that it's human nature to want to hate and scream at them. It doesn't have to be that way. You can be an atheist or a Christian and struggle against that and learn new ways to do it. Case in point, that book, Bridge Builders, from our one of our viewers right now. So you don't have to do that, but it is human nature to do that. And right now we're just going crazy with that.
I think it's worth, I agree with you in a lot of ways there, Richard, and it's worth exploring something you said there. You kind of said it like it was almost like an addition to your main point, but I think it's worth looking at, is that he got on that stage, and this was something I was talking about, I think with you, Richard, on the way to work this morning, was that Trump is not a typical conservative. And I think Christians ought to pause and think about that, like for just a minute, because he's not really your typical conservative. He's actually, if he was running back in 2008 when I was working in politics, he would have been considered more of a centrist liberal almost. Or maybe centrist conservative, or maybe an independent. Matter of fact, I think he did run as an independent at one point, didn't he, back in the early 2000s or something? I'm not.
I just can't remember when. And for people who don't know, Trump was a god in the 80s and the 90s. Trump was a god on both sides. When he appeared on Home Alone 2, I watched Home Alone 2 on opening night. I was 20 something, 22 maybe. The whole audience, left and right, applauded. Oh, that's Donald Trump. So he was a god among men in the 80s and 90s.
I can remember
and fairly liberal.
I can remember him being on Letterman and stuff when I was a kid. Anyway, like all past aside, his political persuasion would not represent the typical conservative party line. in America, which
Right.
I don't think he would represent even what Reagan used to call the moral majority. But yet he's getting these votes. My opinion is on that. My thought is that there are just people. It's like Doug said a minute ago. I think there are people out there that are just voting. They're picking. It's not about who you're
The
voting
least
for.
worst.
It's you're voting against something here,
Right.
and I think so. Yeah. I think what's happened is the shift has went from so far left that even a moderate, maybe liberal, conservative, I'd say he's probably moderate conservative, looks like a far right person almost now. And I hear that a lot especially from people like millennials and people beyond millennial saying like, I didn't change parties. My party changed. Like they moved this way. And I think you see that with these popular commentators like Bill Maher and stuff saying stuff like that too.
Very much so. Yep.
So yeah,
Maybe Bill, we could talk about how politics has changed. I think I'm the senior panelist here. I'm 67, and
Yes,
I
that's right.
recently watched the film about Reagan, which I thought was really well done. I reviewed it actually at Worldview Bulletin, and I remember watching the two debates, Reagan and Carter and Reagan and Mondale. They were very civil. They were sharp, but you had no sense that either person hated the other person, and their policies were different, but they were not radically, totally different. They, I think, offered a clear choice, but the Democratic and Republican parties were not as violently opposed to each other in the 80s or even into the 90s necessarily. And in
That's
the
right.
Reagan film, they showed the fact, and this is true, although they probably embellished it, that Reagan and Tip O'Neill had a friendship. And Tip O'Neill was the leader of the Democratic Party, essentially. And of course, Reagan
Yes.
had been a Democrat and then became Republican, became president. And I just wish somehow we could regain two things: civility, and secondly, some intellectual depth, some real debates on policies, and not just a series of one liners, one after the other. I tell my students, I just told them this yesterday here at Cornerstone, that they should research the Lincoln Douglas debates. This was actually for the Senate race, Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas. These debates would go on for several hours, and then they would break for lunch and then reconvene for a few more hours. This is recounted in Neil Postman's book, Amusing Ourselves to Death. Now compare that with what we have now, what the candidates get a minute or 2 minutes to respond, and there's really no interaction. There's no dialogue. I was teaching about Plato yesterday in my class, Intro to Philosophy, and I said, think about this idea that truth could emerge through dialogue. You're not trying to impose your ego on somebody else. You're not trying to cancel somebody else. You're not trying to be the most impressive person. What if the goal of a conversation was actually knowledge?
Imagine
Justified true
that.
belief. Yeah, that's radical. It just doesn't, and I told him it doesn't happen in politics. Not that it was ever
That's right.
perfect, but it's impossible to find that today on the political scene.
Yeah.
That reminds me of something that Joe Rogan said either this morning or yesterday, is that he is one of the few platforms where you can just sit and talk for 3 hours and you don't have to
Yeah.
scream at each other. And people listen to it. People will spend all day and listen to 3 hours. They might turn off a YouTube clip after 5 minutes, but they'll listen to people talking for 3 hours.
That is a
And
counter
I think,
reaction, yeah, to the short,
yeah,
snippy attack lines. I'm not a big Rogan fan. I haven't watched much of him, but apparently this long form discussion is meeting a need. And
yep,
apparently he is fairly well informed and an interesting conversation partner. So if
right,
that's the case, uh, bully for him. That's good.
Yeah. I
yep,
think that's true for a lot of things, even in the church world. The typical mantra you hear is like, "Oh, you don't want to preach more than 20 minutes. You lose the younger generation." That's really not been my experience. I mean, in my ministry platform, we have lectures that sometimes last an hour, hour and 15 minutes, and our students are glued to that because they're so
Yep.
hungry for truth and substance and authenticity and all these things that you don't get on TikTok. You don't get anywhere else. Matter of fact, we'll see the effect of this in the future. We'll see how far it goes, but a significant amount of the more thoughtful students I have do not even have social media anymore. Um,
Hmm.
they're just kind of walking away from it, and it's because
Good.
they're tired of the clickbait. They're tired of they want more of this, where people just actually sit and talk and not yell at each other and actually try to get to the bottom of something, which
Actually, and I think this is exactly what happened for this election, because a lot of the conservative and pro-Trump friends that I've had, and being a former Marine, having a lot of Marine friends right now, some of whom still think highly of either Trump or Trumpism. Most of them, if you start talking about this Trumpism movement, they'll mostly think about Ben Shapiro or Joe Rogan. Not that Joe Rogan's a teetotaler or Trump guy, but they'll mostly think about those guys rather than Trump. So they would agree with you that if you watch Trump behave for an hour, that might be disappointing. But if you want to talk about policies or how to interact with people,
mm,
they just kind of shifted their mind over to Ben
yeah,
Shapiro or Joe Rogan. I think Ben Shapiro won 2024 rather than Trump, because
Hmm.
Trump had spokesmen who were just better people
Yeah.
than him, and I think they would agree. I think they wouldn't be narcissistic to say, okay, yeah, I try harder to be a better person than he
yeah.
does.
Or even J.D. Vance. I think J.D. Vance was a very strategic and good choice. Not just saying that because he's from my hometown, kind of like his grandmother was from my hometown, wrote a book about Jackson, Kentucky, which is where I'm from. So it's like you almost have to be a fan, right? No, but no, I was a little skeptical of that choice, to be honest, at first, because whether or not he wrote a book about my hometown, I was like, but is this guy going to be a good vice president? Man, he's young. He's inexperienced. I mean, that'll give him Ohio, so that's strategic as far as the electoral college goes. But at the end of the day, like, who is J.D. Vance? We're going to find out. Well, man, you know what I like about J.D. Vance is that he's very he doesn't try to hide behind who he is. That's been the thing, and I think that speaks to a younger generation, and we may even see that come out in the stats later. Because when you saw him on Joe Rogan, he was dropping f bombs and cussing and all this stuff. And at first, as a Christian, I'm like, man, this is not. But I was like, well, we're not electing pastors here. Like, he's just being who he is. He's not trying to hide who he is. Which I would say my diagnosis of JD Vance is he's a very, like, he's an immature Christian. He's very young in his faith. He's followed after Catholicism, whatever that means. But when I heard him talk, he sounded like somebody I knew from Eastern Kentucky. Like, he did not try to hide that. He was just like, even some of the way he said certain phrases and things. So I'm like, that kind of thing. I think that's going to be, Trump is the same way. He doesn't try to hide who he is. He does not try to hide it at all. And then at the other side of that, Kamala, it seemed like she kind of was a chameleon. Just wherever she was, she kind of morphed. You can't really get away with that in the information age. I think you get in front of a camera, it's there. And it's like, why is she acting this way here and this way here? And she's saying the same thing over and over and over again. I don't know if you guys saw that. They juxtaposed three different speeches where she's just literally reading off of a teleprompter. And honestly, it's no criticism against her. If I'm doing presidential speeches, I'd probably be reading off a teleprompter too. That'd be nerve wracking. But I think this generation just likes the off the cuff, like, be real, man, kind of thing. Um, yeah, but here's the thing.
Richard, can I ask you a
Yeah,
question?
go ahead, Doug. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
Richard. Yeah, you're an atheist, so you think we're merely evolved animals, and you think
Right.
that human nature leads to hating others and so on. So, what is your basis for opposing human nature and arguing for civility?
You and I could. I've been praying to the random chaos for years that you and I could have a debate on morality. because I think
All
that
right,
everything
well,
is
let's set it
morality.
up right now, buddy.
Uh, well, actually, we probably, because I know this is about decreasing the vitriol, but I'm really, this is really fortuitous and divine providence that
Okay.
we're meeting, because
The providence of
I really do
chance,
think,
right?
right, I really do think that everything is morality. Even the moral anti-realists who are like, there is no anti-realism. I'm a big fan of Sean McDowell's dad. What Josh McDowell would say back in the '90s, if someone said there's no morality, he was like, "You keep jabbing them, and you'll find out what they're moral about." And that's true. Everybody, even people who deny objective morality, you'll find it if you keep talking to them. There's something that people freak out about that they fall in love with.
Yeah.
So my push on morality is that the self-interest and the terrible things that happen is part of our biology, but we also have a biology for cooperation, which evolved, and we also have a biology for zealotry. And zealotry doesn't have to be a bad thing, because you could argue that Jesus was a zealot. But I think that selfishness, cooperation, and zealotry kind of fight it out within us, and that we have biological infrastructure for all three of those.
So why pick one over the other if it's just biology?
I think everybody's trying to do the best they can. I think everybody is like, okay, I'm going to enter this world and I'm going to do what I want, and people are going to love me, and that doesn't work. And then you say, well, I'm just going to be nice to everybody, and that doesn't work. And then you say, well, what's important to me? And you find something that's important, and you find like-minded people, and then you enjoy that, and then you try to decide how you're going to treat other people. I think it's a constant struggle. And it's less about good versus evil, although I'm not to say that there's no such thing. It's less about that. It's more about, am I going to be selfish? Am I going to be cooperative? Or am I going to be a zealot? And if so, to what extent? Can I be a little bit of each of those? And it's trial and error. For me, everything is trial and error.
Well, I don't want to hijack the show from Bill, but when
No,
you
go
said you're an
ahead.
atheist and you talked about human nature and so on, it made me
Yeah,
think about that. But really,
yeah,
Richard, if you want to try to set up a dialogue or debate on this somehow, I'd love to do that.
yes. I would
Let's
love it. I've been hoping for years to have this moment. So
Oh, okay.
I'm glad this happened.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
something good that came out of the presidential election for those who are doubters out
that's
there.
right.
So
Yeah.
well, let's schedule that later on in the season. I just laid
Okay.
out the calendar for the next season, so maybe December or January we can try to get that going. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Hey,
And
there's one
I'll be
thing.
at ETS.
Yeah.
I'll be at ETS next month if you want to shake hands, Doctor.
Yeah, actually, I will not be there, but
Oh,
I
okay.
would enjoy meeting you sometime.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
maybe we could make a road trip up there in up north sometime. Where's Cornerstone
Absolutely.
again? Is Cornerstone in
We're in Grand
Michigan?
Rapids.
Yeah, Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Yeah,
Okay,
Grand
that's right.
Rapids, Michigan. Right.
Great school, I've heard. The enrollment, like enroll now. Classes are open for
Yeah,
students.
that's right. Go to our webpage right now
Um,
and sign up.
so as I broadcast from HCU, I'd better be careful about that. But
We don't
but
have an apologetics program, Bill, so we can't compete with you guys on
oh, there we go.
that.
One thing we haven't talked about, which we ought to spend some time on in these last few minutes, and by the way, as is tradition, there are some people watching live right now. If you're watching live and have a question you'd like for us to address as a panel, please drop it in the comments. Doesn't matter what platform you're watching it on. We're broadcasting on Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube right now. So if you have a question, I do have one thumbs down. I rarely ever get those, but it's that time of year, I guess. So if
It's got to
anybody
be
has,
for Richard, not for me.
yeah, that's it. So, so yeah, if anybody has any questions, throw them on there. Right now, Lindsay Medenwald has been the sole contributor right now, and so with all three comments. So that said, okay, personality or platforms, which one's more important?
You
The
mean for a
person or the
presidential
platform?
candidate?
Yeah, for a presidential candidate, president or a platform?
Well, I think in
What
2024 the
personality or
platform won.
Hold on a
You
minute,
can,
Rich.
you can go first.
Let me clarify what I'm saying.
First.
Let me clarify what I'm saying. When you're trying to choose a leader, okay? I'll give you the background of this question. When Trump was on the Rogan podcast, he said something that I'd never thought about before. I thought about the president does obviously he does appoint his cabinet, but I did not understand just the depths of what would be appointed in the first like 10 days in office, and he said just shy of about 10,000 appointed positions trickles down from the presidential office, which makes me think about what 10,000 people do you want running your country? So to me personally, you guys are welcome to push back on this. To me personally, there's no way that I could ever elevate a personality over a platform with that kind of information. That's just where I'm coming from. But as somebody who comes from a different perspective, Richard, somebody who comes from like the never Trumper kind of perspective, like I think you're probably elevating person over platform. But at the end of the day, so go ahead. You're welcome to explore that a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say, if Trump appoints people like Ben Shapiro, I'm not saying Ben Shapiro, but people like Ben Shapiro and not people like Alex Jones, then he's going to have a successful presidency. I don't know what's going to be more important to him. I think personally, loyalty is everything to him, and he cares less about capabilities than he does about loyalty. So what worries me is that he appoints some really capable people, then he wants them to do things they don't want to do, then they leave, and then he replaces them with loyalists, and then they just do whatever he wants. Then it's going to be less of a platform. I think the platform is very important, and I think, for me, like I said, I'm a conservative. For me, it's all about the system, and the participants have to invest in that system, and they have to be participants who care and capable. And if he has that, great. I worry that because of who he is, that he might not be able to keep that for 4 years. And I'd like to be wrong here. Hopefully the people that he appoints will keep him honest. But I do think the platform is very important, and I worry that he might not be the person to manage that, but we'll see. Not to say that Kamala was. Like I'm not here to say, guys, you should have picked a Democrat, because the Democrats have got their own problems. I've always said that you guys had 4 years to replace the single point of failure with a strong conservative, and you didn't do it. And that may or may not be something that you think about going forward next 4 years.
Well, I would imagine the next 4 years is we're not going to go into this. We don't have time, but it's probably going to be an AOC versus J.D. Vance run.
I think so.
I would imagine, but that's my speculation. What do you think? What do you think, Doug? What's more important, platforms or personalities?
Well, character is important because you have to be able to follow through on your platform.
Sure.
So that's crucial. You said earlier, we're not voting for a pastor here. We're voting for a president and a vice president, the commander in chief, not the pastor in chief or the theologian in chief. That's the way it works. So you'd like to have someone who's fundamentally decent and trustworthy, and also has strong principles. And I think Ronald Reagan was in that kind of category. I don't think Donald Trump is. I think he's a very different person. He's not fundamentally conservative in a principled way. He's more of a populist, and there's a big difference between populism and conservatism. People conflate those. But given the alternative, and given what he's running on in terms of securing the border and dealing with inflation and letting America use its energy resources, and he's less radical on abortion than the Democratic Party. I'm disappointed with the Republican Party's shift on abortion. Very strongly pro-life. Excuse me. But you have to at least have enough character as president and vice president to put into effect, or at least attempt to put into effect, the policies that you ran on. And what some politicians do, particularly people on the left, is they run from the center and then they govern from the left. That's what Biden did, and that's what Kamala would have done, but thank God we don't have to experience that.
What do you think, just in closing here, because I know you have a class to get to here, Doug, so we don't want to hold you much longer at all.
I just got hired. I don't want to get fired here, Bill.
Yeah. If they fire you, I'll put in a word for you at HCU if you get fired. Be a little hotter on you, but okay. What do you think the message is of this election? Because I'm looking right now looking at the map. I'm looking at seeing where we're at. I haven't looked at it almost all day because I've been busy. But we've got 98% reporting now in Pennsylvania, with Trump in the lead there by almost 2 percentage points. You have Michigan, he's ahead by a percentage point and a half. Wisconsin, he's ahead by a percentage. He's there. It's closing in, but yeah, he's going to 99% reporting percentage point. Nevada flipped. That really blew my mind. It looks like it's going to flip with 85% reporting. Trump's leading by about 5 percentage points. We still don't know about Arizona. They finally called Alaska, so he's at 295.
He's going to win Arizona. I live in Arizona, and I know my people. He's going to win here.
So you have. I mean, this is not a close election like everybody thought. This is obviously a message being sent. What do you guys think the message is here? I mean, in my personal opinion, my humble opinion, I think the message is like America wants something different out of the Democratic Party than what it's getting. And I'll just leave it at that. Like it's obvious that there's a big issue here. But we can start with Doug here. Like what do you think the message is of this election, Doug?
Well, the message is that the DEI candidate wasn't sufficient, really, because I think when you look at Kamala Harris, she has no real substance. She doesn't have a track record of achievement, but she fits the intersectional criteria of being Black and being a woman. And perhaps the Democrats will realize they can't win on that. They have to produce people who have some good history in governing, who have some sound principles that they will stick to, who can communicate clearly without the word salad. So whether or not they can provide anybody like that for the next election, I don't know. But perhaps this is a wake-up call for the DEI agenda, that competence and merit matters. And the American public was not as catatonic as I thought they were. And they realized that.
Mm-hmm.
That's my best take on it anyway.
What do you think, Richard? What's the message of this election?
There was in 2020, not a single person voted for Joe Biden, not even Joe Biden. Nobody voted for Joe Biden. It was literally not Trump versus Trump. And not Trump had 85 million, I forget how many people. They were just like, okay, not him. And Joe Biden was the most palatable of the Democrats. As long as they got rid of the ones that the conservative Democrats didn't like Bernie, then they were okay with Joe. And so then not Trump won. All of the areas where Joe Biden did well, all of his people in each area, Kamala Harris did not do as well, not even close. So all of those people who were like not Trump, and this is something I said in the beginning, there was a huge not Trump push in 2020 that's just not there now. And if you look over at the Trump campaign, he had an LGBTQ speaker at his rally. He's got atheists. He's got Brett Weinstein, who taught me about tribalism 10 years ago and now is probably one of the most anti-left tribal people on Twitter right now. He's got atheists. He's got LGBTQ. He's got people of different color. It's just a diverse new stage than it was 10 years ago. Whether that's what Christians want or not, it's what it is. And the left banking on this racist thing that's just not there anymore. It doesn't exist. So those 20 million people didn't show up this time.
And I would say, and you're welcome, I'm sure Doug would agree with me on this, that Christians have a moral obligation now to hold what we voted for accountable, in our government too. And I'll be honest, I do have one big concern about this is now not only do we have Trump as president, which would have been who would have been my choice, but we also have him with no checks and balances. We have a Senate. He won the Senate, Congress,
the House,
Supreme Court. Yeah, it's all there. The Senate, the House, Supreme Court, and the executive branch is all red. And I don't know the last time that happened. I can't. I was going to look that up today just because.
And the Supreme Court is not supposed to be political technically.
I know that.
Right.
I know that, but I mean we have and they've pushed back on some of the things he's tried to do too, and I hope that it's just I think one of the things that when I go to these different countries and talk about worldview issues, they often say like how blessed we are to have a checks and balances system that curtails a lot of corruption that they simply don't have in a lot of African countries, Asian countries, and stuff. So yeah, I think we just really need to pray that this is a smooth 4 years, because it could certainly backfire on us. It's going to be really easy for people to say, look how these Republicans have destroyed this country, and have a blue wave coming back, and this could like start a polarization thing. It's like there's some things like that we really need to be thinking through and praying through. And while we celebrate the victory as Christians would, we also should continue to pray for our country and our leaders. Like the war is definitely not over. So yeah.
Well, if I could just add something,
Sure.
My ministry, my calling is really to be a teacher and a writer, and I'm very committed to the church. And this is where Richard and I are in a part company. I think the ultimate issue is being reconciled to God through Jesus Christ,
Yep.
and living a virtuous life in the power of the Holy Spirit, and repenting from sin as individuals, and we hope repenting from sin nationally, putting some of this madness behind us, like the transgender ideology, the pro-abortion madness. And so whoever is president matters tremendously, no question. But the gates of hell will not prevail against the church.
That's
and
right.
The ultimate message of liberation is the gospel, because it is the power of salvation to all, for all who believe. And that's where my ultimate hope is.
That's right.
It's in Christ, in the gospel. And if people come to Christ and are trying to live a godly biblical life in the power of the Holy Spirit, that goodness and virtue will radiate out into the world. But then also Christians need to work with like-minded people, whether they're Christians or not. Schaeffer talked about this, being a co-belligerent with someone. So you may agree with someone on an issue and work with them. They have a different religious worldview than you do, but you're both citizens, so you work together for what you take to be the common good. So I'm, relieved that Donald Trump won, and the Republicans have a shot to change some things for the better. But it's got to go a lot deeper than that in the church, in education, teaching the Bible, teaching a Christian worldview, making sure that the family is stronger, the churches are stronger, and that's the long-term strategy. It's not who gets to win the next election.
Right.
But that's important, obviously. Just not everything.
To remain reasonable, just be able to reason with one another. And it's one of the things I appreciated about Trump's acceptance speech last night, or victory speech, whatever you want to call it. It really wasn't a victory speech. He wasn't trying to grandstand anything. I was kind of shocked. I don't know if you guys have seen it or not, but he said, now that now it's time to put all this stuff behind us and work to make America what it needs to be. And I'm like, well, if we can maintain that, this will be a success in some way.
Yep.
So let's just pray that happens. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much. I know we've got to hop off here. It was way too short. We could keep talking for a couple hours, but I sure appreciate your time hopping on to the Truth Conversation for a little bit on this special kind of post-election coverage. And tomorrow we're going to have a couple of other guests. We were confirmed a minute ago that Tim Stratton and Corey Miller were interested in doing a conversation. So that'll be fun. So I'm sure. And let's just continue to reason with each other. That's what this is about. So, well, thank you guys. Thank you for your time. I'll let you get back to your families, your classrooms, and I'm going to do the same. God bless you guys.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you all.
It was an honor, Doctor. Thank you, Bill.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Appreciate it. Let's do that debate now. We're going to do that
look forward to
debate.
it.
We're going to schedule it for sure.
All right.
We're morally obligated.
All right.
That's right.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
All righty. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining in today. Like I said, tomorrow, tune in around the same time. We've not set a time because we didn't plan these. They're just kind of like, oh man, we really should be talking right now about this kind of stuff. So yeah, we're gonna try to just continue to make sense of what's going on around us. Said these are not victory laps; these are just conversations. So if you want to be involved in that, please join us again tomorrow. We'll be doing these hopefully throughout the rest of the week. and then we'll be back on our regular schedule next Tuesday. So thank you guys for tuning in. God bless you, and we will see you again soon on the Truth Conversation. We'll see you.